My Vampire Lord. Written and narrated by Lady Spookaria. And featuring Baron Landred, Madam Raven, Mad Chatter, TJ Lee, Frezzman, and Dodge the Blade. It has been a long time since I've seen him. There were times when I was sure he had been watching me, keeping an eye on me. I could feel him. That presence during the night when the lamplights of the street would be lit. Often it would rain. The sound was oddly peaceful for me in the warmth, while torture for the poor wretches outside in the chilling rain. The water trickled down the window in a soft, gentle caress. Each raindrop was beautiful, and I could stare at them for hours. The horses' hooves made noise on the cobbled streets as they pulled the various carriages and carts to their final destination. Each of them focused on their lives, a world away from me and my own. I would gaze out the window in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. Any sign of him. I'd ignore the sound of the streets below, people chatting in the world beyond my room. I wondered who they were, what their names were, and I would never know. They were the lower class and born to a life below, one of servitude. The soft fire of my room would burn while I waited, all in hopes of seeing him again. Hopes I could not share with another living soul. Even in the warmth of summer, I would still feel the cold, and staying warm was a trial I had to face. My life has always been sheltered, hidden away like one of my mother's precious porcelain dolls, and kept safe from the world beyond. I would watch the children down below. Even the servants' children were kept far from me, forbidden to play with me, both due to my illness and my social standing. I was always expected to remain around people of my own social class. Yet, I never saw girls of my own class. I knew they existed. Every now and then, I would see them traveling in their expensive carriages, several of them together at once, smiling and talking among themselves. Why wasn't I able to speak to them? Why was I not permitted a friend to call my own? My mother told me they would make me ill, that too much excitement was bad for me, and it came from my blue blood. I have always been frail. Since childhood I struggled to keep down most foods, and I was often sickly, unable to handle exercise or any stress, and thus been locked away. How did a respectable young lady like myself meet such an interesting foreigner? It was at one of my father's social events, and one of the rare occasions I was permitted to attend. All of high society was invited, and they all came, dressed in their finery, each of them with an impressive pedigree or wealth of their own. In the candlelight, they danced in a sea of decorated skirts. Silently, I sat beside my mother, ever the social butterfly. She was deep in conversation with a duke or another. The duke caught my eye, and he was charming, handsome, blue-blooded, and with a life of privilege. No doubt my lady mother wished to connect our families through marriage. Yet, I found my eye drawn to the stranger who entered the room, an unnatural twinkle in his eye. He was well dressed, a foreign stranger, and there was no mention of his name, nor the pedigree of his bloodline like other people had. We made eye contact as he walked around the gathered group of people. Men and women's gazes lingered on him. He moved like an elusive shadow, and his eyes glowed where the candlelight did not linger. I knew my mother and the Duke were speaking to me. I could see their lips move and their muted voices vying for my attention. Nothing could break it. Until the Duke's concerned face moved in front of mine.
Are you well? Should I send for the physician?
I shook my head to decline politely. I tried to catch sight with the stranger again, and the vampire's eyes made contact with mine. Time stood still. His eyes were both man's and beast's, striking, green, and I felt a weakness in my limbs. The connection broke, and I felt myself lowered to the ground. My lady mother was making a fuss, and the last thing I remembered was the Duke's concerned face before my mind fell into darkness. I woke in bed, my maidservant tending to the fire, and I wondered whether it had all been a dream. Those eyes. I could never forget the eyes that would haunt me. It did not take long before my lady mother opened the door, strode inside without asking, and sat beside me. Her hand took mine and stroked it tenderly. The only time she showed me care and affection was when I'd proven useful to either her or the family in some way. I guessed what it was about before her lips even opened.
My love,
she said, and we both knew she was lying.
You had a tumble last night. I hope you are well.
This ritual of concern was expected for me, and I was willing to perfectly play my part. She smiled, squeezed my hand, and was itching to tell me.
The Duke has taken an interest in you. He referred to you as a fair flower and has begun negotiations with your father.
She watched me closely, wished to see any reaction, and wanted to see if I would respond appropriately. My hand rested on my chest. I blushed and smiled a little. Not too much. It was inappropriate to show too much enthusiasm. My thoughts did not matter. The match would open doors for my family members that would otherwise be closed to them.
I see you are overwhelmed with emotion,
my lady mother remarked. She could never handle tears, affection, childish antics, and had always kept her distance from me.
I will leave you to rest.
She stood, and without another word she walked away. The maidservant opened the door and closed it behind her before she too left, leaving me to my solitude and my thoughts. I pulled the covers back and went to stare out the window. It was the only time I could see the world beyond. There was nothing for me out there. Yet there was nothing for me in here either. Marriage to the Duke meant I would rise. A duchess. I would never want for anything. The nurse, someone who had been with me since childhood, entered the room. The only person to show me any kindness.
Hello, my dear. Come, it's time for your bath,
she said, her eyes kind, and she assisted me from my bed. Her hands are coarse, tough, and weathered from a life of difficult work. She ran a bath for me. I stood waiting before being assisted into the warm water, silently. The maidservants would rarely speak to me. They never initiated conversation. And from childhood, even when I tried, they would avoid my questions both submissively and politely. I wanted to know what their lives were like outside this home. Who were their parents? Who were their loved ones? Where did they live? It didn't matter. They assisted me as I bathed. I imagined the stranger's face again, where his eyes shone in the candlelight, and wanted to see him again. I was dressed for bed. The maidservant tucked me in, and the nurse came forward to tell me a bedtime story.
When I was a girl, I used to live on a farm in the countryside. The home was much smaller than yours. We had many animals we would raise from milk or meat. We had a small garden where my father would grow food for the family. It was the most...
My nurse was interrupted. She stood up and went to stand by the wall. Like a piece of furniture. One that could talk. My parents and the family physician entered to give me my medicine. Silently they stood by the doorway as if to stop my escape. I've always had to take it. There's never been a single day where I've gone without it. If I don't take it, I die. The doctor greeted me kindly, listened to my pulse, and I watched as the dreaded black bottle came out. With a trembling hand, he poured the thick violet syrup onto the large spoon and held it out to me. I wanted to complain. I wanted to scream that I didn't want to take it. Instead, I opened my mouth, swallowed, and soon I drifted off to sleep. I could still feel it burning my throat. I dreamt of the stranger. In the dream, we met in the parlor of my family's home. I imagined he would be well-spoken, a gentleman, and we discussed the world outside. Why was I so drawn to somebody I had never spoken to? Soon my head felt like it was spinning. I could hear voices downstairs. No doubt another lucid dream, and I was swept away by the words.
She bears a striking resemblance to your sister.
Yes, they do. There are times when I nearly forget and let it...
Shh, 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 shh. Do not upset yourself. The medicine seems to be taking effect. She sleeps more soundly now, and I believe, soon, she'll be able to live a normal life.
I worry there will come a time when she remembers him and her old life. One she can never return to.
My father said, squeeze my mother's hand tenderly. And the first true sign of affection I've seen them show each other.
I fear for her. Once it becomes known...
We will keep trying, Abigail. We won't stop trying until we discover something that works.
I felt myself being pulled back into my body. Slowly. Carefully. Tendrils pulling me, and soon I drifted into a dreamless sleep. I awoke the next morning. My monotonous life kept going like an endless cycle. I do not know how many days or nights passed. Occasionally, I would hear my parents' words.
We need to find an answer. She's on the verge.
I will kill that monster. Will find him. Will find him.
I'm close to coming up with a cure. I believe the doctor.
There isn't much we can do, but pray.
Oh, you're a good lass. We lost the farm and had to sell up. It broke my father's heart to let it go. I want to go and see it one last time.
My lady mother and the family physician entered the room. This time the pair lingered at the door and glanced at each other.
We have a new medicine we would like you to try.
My lady mother said I would take whatever they gave me. I could only imagine what vile concoction they had managed to brew together. I must have shown my displeasure. A mistake on my part.
Do not fuss. Come.
I sat up and watched the physician mixing two liquids together. The same thick violet syrup now mixed with a silvery one. The smell made my head spin, Surely, they did not wish to poison me? I accepted and felt the liquid burn my mouth. My lady mother's hand held my lips shut. I looked at her, frightened. There was a sincere, even loving look in her eyes, and I felt guilty for refusing to begin with. I swallowed and it burned on the way down. My body started to tremble. My fingers locked and clenched. I choked, and a thick substance burst from my mouth. I collapsed to the ground. I surprisingly felt better when I awoke. My fingertips were no longer blue. They were still pale, but they had life in them. I could feel them. Slowly, I rubbed my fingers and thumbs together. Whatever it was, it worked. My lady mother entered and told me I would be welcoming guests to my father's party. I was bathed and dressed, ready to meet the guests. I wondered if the handsome stranger would return once more. While I walked down the long spiral staircase with my lady mother, she told me how the Duke would come and how with the aid of the physician's medicine, I would finally be able to live a normal life. I'd be able to marry, leave the house, and enjoy other things that women of my station were able to. Elegantly dressed, I smiled warmly and stood alongside my parents to meet our guests.
You're looking better.
My father remarked, surprised I had survived the doctor's medicines and my mother's nagging.
Now, do I need to remind you how important this night is? You must look your best and be on your best behavior. The connection to the Duke's family will open many doors for us. It is for the good of the family.
This connection is important and will set you up for a prosperous future.
My lady mother added.
A future of prosperity for us all.
Each time he spoke, I nodded politely. Each of them remarked at how healthy I looked, and I had to rely on their word. A mirror was a vanity I was not permitted to have. Soon the Duke came, and I knew I'd be expected to dance with him. The proposal of marriage would be declared before the aristocracy. I knew he was watching me.
Ah, hello, my dear. You certainly do not look frail as you did before. You gave us all such a fright.
The Duke cordially said. For a man with blue blood, he had considerable kindness towards others. I smiled politely, and the Duke continued.
Do reach out to me if you need anything. When we live together, I want for you to be happy. I have several estates in the countryside. My physician tells me that sea air is good for health, and so is country air. I suppose that is why the peasants out there grow quite tall.
He rambled to himself. Then I saw him. I saw him in the corner, and I did my best to slowly escape the company of my lady mother's gaze and those of the other guests. My father was busy speaking to the Duke. I felt an ever so gentle caress move up my arm. I looked down and saw his hand. My heart fluttered. He leaned in and whispered.
I thought to find you alone.
I felt a shiver go down my spine, and I confess, I felt things it was not proper for an unmarried woman to feel.
It has been too long since I saw you last.
I was speechless, drawn in by his words, his touch, his everything.
It has been too long. I never expected to see you like this. I have missed you.
I admit to finding it strange. Surely, we only saw each other once and for a fleeting moment. This was different. He leaned down, cheek against mine and pulled me close. Why did I have a feeling this happened many times before?
Have you forgotten? I have waited a long time until I was sure the moment was right.
I looked around, confused, and desperately tried to remember the dreams I had. The ones concerning him. We had gone to places I had only read about in books. Danced, boldly dancing in the night, and I
need you to remember.
He whispered, and the urge encouraged me to do so. We danced naked in the blood of our servants, drinking their blood and enjoying an intimate embrace. I remembered that taste, the blood, looking into my prey's eyes as I stole their life from them. That intoxicating feel. I wanted it back. I craved nothing else. My mouth began to ache. I winced as the pain filled my mouth, cut my hand and spat what looked to be my teeth into my hand. My fingertips probed already new ones. Fangs were replacing it. It all made sense. I know you. Ah! There was a crunch. A slow, wet sound as I glanced down at my chest. A wooden stake pierced through, and I gasped at the betrayal. He looked at me with those sad eyes and caressed my cheek.
My love, I am sorry.
He whispered, kissed my lips.
We cannot do this again. I am so sorry. We will die together.
He pulled the stake before he plunged it into his own, crushing ribs and destroying the organs. It takes us time to die. No smoke, no fanfare. We would have died together. Except he missed my heart. The aroma of his blood filled the air and I was ravenous. My hands took his and pulled him close. Virgin fangs sank hungrily into his neck and I fed. Every drop made me stronger. A renewed sense of health. The memories flooded in clearly now. My lady mother was really my great niece. They'd used experiments on me in order to keep me compliant, to tame me. The stranger, my fellow vampire, was my child, my beloved. I had heard the whispers of fools to deny what he was. They wanted to make me human again. I felt rage, nothing but the purest rage. I could feel the bones in his body break while the relaxing symphony of my father's, or son-in-law's music played in the background, a relaxing sound to my savagery. My father drew his sword while my mother stood behind him.
Do not come closer.
He warned, ready to fight but was easily outmatched. I stepped past the blade, moved it to one side and broke his wrist before my fangs found his flesh. I feasted while my mother screamed behind him. Her well-bred nature failed her as she tried to pull me off him. And in my bloodlust, she too met her death. Again, fangs met flesh, and I fed again. People fled screaming. The Duke tried to intervene in the background but was dragged away by his servants. And soon, the place was eerily silent. The music stopped playing. I panted and felt life run through me, happy for the first time in years with the knowledge of who and what I am. I could hear the nurse's frantically beating heart from the cupboard. For a while, I stood there drenched in the blood of my human kin, and a part of me wanted to rip open the door, tear into her neck and feast. Her kindness saved her life. Nurse, I will not harm you. You may not remain here. She opened the door and shakily looked at my blood-soaked gown, my eyes alive with the taste of blood and with a newfound vigor. She trembled, bowed her head and walked past me. Stop, I bid her, and she paused. In her hands I placed a coin purse in it, filled with gold coins. More wealth than generations of her family had. The purse alone could pay to feed a family for a year. Take this and buy back your family's farm.
Thank you.
She answered, without looking back, and made her way out of the bloodbath. I stepped out into the darkness, the light in the streets illuminated by the moon. Perhaps I would pay the Duke a visit. Sunlight never suited me, yet moonlight always did. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let me know if you're interested in a part 2. Please check out my guests who joined me. Each of them did an amazing work with their characters, and I am blessed that they joined me. Their links are in the description below. Also, don't forget that I have merch and Patreon and a Throne account if you wish to support me. All support is greatly appreciated. Make sure you check out my previous videos and my previous stories if you haven't already. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.